Welcome everyone to the EED webinar number 1 of 2020. It is January 15th and our theme is Connecting to Source. We have several people joining us internationally, so welcome everyone. And for those listening to the recording, welcome as well. We hope you enjoy this webinar. So, connecting to source. We'll have to define what source is and what are the benefits of when we connect to it, how to connect to it. So we're going to cover all of that. I wanted to hear from you first, those of you joining and participating live. What in particular intrigued you about this webinar theme, and what are some of the initial questions you have? Because I can always incorporate that and integrate that as we go along. So are there any initial comments or questions as we get started?
Well, what intrigues me about the topic connecting to source is that it's a discovery that is not easy to make each time, because it's different.
Okay. And anything else on that, or anything that you really want to pinpoint specifically with me while we discuss it?
I'm mainly interested in the point of views being shared here.
Okay.
Yeah. In detail, I would be interested in like how does it feel? Like I'm always more from the pragmatic point of view. So I try to see how, okay, if I embody something new, like what is different practically.
Okay.
So recently I was like observing myself when I was in different states of game, dream, or being closer to source. And I could observe that my thoughts were more easygoing the closer I was to source. So these things are interesting for me.
Okay, great. Well, I will define those levels that you've mentioned: game, dream, source. And yeah, we will look at what are the distinct qualities of source when you're experiencing source directly. And by the way, it's not hard to get there. Most of the time we're distracted away from source. So in this webinar, I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to access it, recognize it, and then maintain it. And that can be applied to working on yourself. It can also be applied to working with others. And that can be definitely applied to a coaching situation or even just a regular conversation. And what are the differences when you are connected or disconnected to source? Anyone else with some initial comments or questions? And then I'll...
When you were just talking that it is also related to normal conversations, I would assume, no, like normal relationships. I realize so much complaining, people are complaining a lot in talks, and then I like to bring in questions that lead away from this because it bores me to talk about these things. I rather want to see them talk about something inspiring, something that gives us good feelings all together, no, a good vibe. So I think it's a good connection from that point of view, that we feel the group also nicely together to achieve the source jointly somehow also.
Okay, great. Yeah. We're going to look at what are the benefits, how does that affect the relationship, and how can you steer the focus of the relationship, focus of the conversation, so that you can touch into source more often. Because it's true, the relationship itself, the conversation itself can start getting away from source. And then we're just getting caught up in repeating stories and beliefs that keep the disconnection alive. Whereas we can turn that around and actually use the conversation, the relationship, the experience to reinforce our connection to source, which changes the whole quality of the conversation, the quality of the relationship, etc. Anyone else? If you have comments or questions along the way, just jump in at any time. I'm perfectly okay to be interrupted, all right? So don't feel like you have to wait, all right? Okay, so what are we looking at today? Well, we're going to have an overview of source being and the essential qualities that go along with that. I will define essential qualities. When we start entering essence or getting in touch with our essential nature, our essential self, there are particular qualities that show up. And I'll give you a whole overview of what that is, as well as how to access. So once we're at source, and I'm calling this source being, all right? How does source being generate strength, willpower, creativity, and resilience, and eventually gives us back our autonomy, sovereignty over self, all right? So that we're not looking outside of ourselves for strength or power or creativity, but it's actually being generated from within, and then we can begin radiating that, and it becomes limitless. We always have access to this. But as I said earlier, we can be distracted away from our own internal source and be tempted to seek someone else or something else as the source. And that will give us an illusion of strength, power, creativity, but it is limited, all right? The only reason it's limited is because it's not within, so it creates a dependency. And if that thing outside disappears, so does the strength, the willpower, and creativity, all right? We're going to look at some practical tips for awakening conscious access to source. I'm going to give you some simple ways to access it and maintain it and stay awake, all right? And in fact, really what I'm giving you are just some key questions to ask yourself or ask the other person, and that always leads us into source. Simple ways to sustain resilience and enhance well-being. Again, I'll give you a pattern of questions that you can ask over and over and over again to keep the resilience alive and keep reinforcing the well-being, as opposed to focusing on what's lacking or the emptiness, or focusing on fear, which can take us away from source, all right? Any questions there? Any comments?
The way I understand it is that source is always there, and the trick or the key is to be connected to it and then let it unfold whatever wants to generate it, no? Because then out of this, the strength comes and we can do great things in the world.
Exactly.
So what we need to do is always, in case we lose it, reconnect with the source and be in the source connection. No?
That's right. And in fact, the trick is, like you said, it's really just to keep reconnecting. We will have a tendency to connect and then disconnect, and connect and disconnect. And sometimes there's a false connection where we might think we're connected, but not really. I can give you some tips on how to test that out. But if you really want to be simple about it, it's not that we have to stay permanently at source, okay? And it's not necessarily a permanent connection. We have to be mindful. And we'll disconnect, connect, disconnect, reconnect. And so really the whole trick is just to, where am I now? What am I connected with? If it's not source, reconnect to it. And like you said, once we're connected to source, everything flows from there. It's quite natural and automatic. So the discipline is more about sustaining and reinforcing and reconnecting, okay? And it's much simpler than it sounds, but because we can get so easily distracted, it can become complex. And it's really the distractions that make it complex. That's it. All right. I'm going to do a quick rundown of what is emergent essence dynamics, and then we'll get into the content here. Emergent essence dynamics is it's all based on building resilience and reconnecting to resilience and using resilience as a way forward for building relationship, for personal development, for coaching, for leadership. It is a holistic approach to everything. And it is based on fractal patterns. It's a fractal-based model. So fractals are small repeating patterns that are appearing everywhere in the small scale and the large scale. When we work with fractals, it actually becomes simpler to navigate through life, through complexity, through relationships, because we'll see that there is the same thing happening over and over and over again. And when we can see a complex situation through the fractal lens, the situation actually becomes more simplified. And the advantage to that is when you can shift that recurring pattern, then everything transforms. And we don't have to force a transformation. It becomes natural because we're shifting the pattern, not the situation. So what we're doing is we're looking at what's happening and pinpointing what's driving the situation, what's driving the relationship at the most fundamental level. And there is where we're going to find the basic fractal pattern. And what we're not doing is we're not trying to transform something. We're actually working from acceptance first. When we come from acceptance, that enables us to see what's going on, because otherwise, if we're not accepting, then we're resisting, and we're going to try and force transformation. We're going to try to modify, change, and we're actually getting away from the basic fractal pattern. The way into the basic fractal pattern is acceptance first, and then to build resilience and restore well-being, which creates autonomy. Then we can start naturally shifting things, because things are being shifted from choice and liberation as opposed to running from fear, weakness, desperation, need, or emptiness. And we'll look at that fear and emptiness a little bit later. And what we're actually doing is, resistance and resilience are actually the same thing, but resistance is coming more from the ego trying to control everything. Resilience comes from source or essence, which is unconditional acceptance of everything because it's coming from limitless potential. So rather than trying to eliminate the ego, which is trying to control everything, we're actually reconciling the ego with essence so they can be cooperative, so that the ego can understand it is also coming from source. It doesn't need to be its own source. It can channel source. The ego is trained to try to imitate source. Therefore, it's trying to control everything. It's trying to validate its existence, and therefore it's trying to change and transform everything because it's actually running away from the reality around it, which is everything is based in essence. Essence is constantly transforming itself. But as a paradox, essence is also limitless potential. Therefore, it is everything. Therefore, it's immutable. Therefore, it's actually not changing anything. It's just a constant rearrangement of itself. Am I making sense, or am I running away from you guys? Okay. So what EED is doing is it wants to capture essence, connect that to ego, so the ego can calm down and work cooperatively with essence and not be so driven to run and change. Therefore, we're not working with transformation, but transmutation. So we're taking everything that's there and channeling it into its purest form, into its purest expression, most high expression of itself. Whereas if
I want to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead, Emiel. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about the definition of ego, because mostly ego as something like negative. But what does the positive good ego actually look like? Like, I think it's kind of like our body itself, or what is the ego?
Yeah, let's say that it's it's our mindset, it's our personality, it's our identity. I would say an easy way to understand ego is our persona and identity, okay? It's a construct. It's a vehicle to express our more permanent and timeless nature or self or essence. But ego is trapped in time, linear time. whereas essence is timeless. Past, present, future all exist at the same time, whereas ego goes dot by dot by dot by dot, one frame at a time. And ego is really trying to capture everything at once, but because it's linear in time, it's constantly running around and trying to change and capture. It's trying to imitate essence. It's trying to pretend like it's a timeless thing. The positive aspect is essence doesn't live in our world. We live in a world based on duality or polarity. It's based on time, okay? We have, one frame at a time. Ego is the vehicle to create with, okay? But it's not the creative source. Essence is the creative source, but essence doesn't live in this world. So we use ego in order to channel the essence into this world. That's one way to think about it. Now, ego can be identity, it can be personality. And that can get very complex. Why? Because there are so many facets of ourselves, so many expressions of essence, but we're really expressing one facet at a time. And there's an illusion that our personality or identity is rigid. I'm only this one way of being, or I'm only this one way of being. Whereas in reality, at one time, we can be one personality to another, to another, to another, okay? We're in reality really switching mindsets, switching personalities. You can prove that to yourself when you think, should I go to work or should I stay in bed? Should I go to work or stay in bed? Those are two personalities. One wants to relax, one wants to work. They're two separate aspects. That's one way to keep it simple for yourselves. So it's almost like we're a multiprocessor, all right? If you think of computers, they actually are single processors, but if you have multiprocessors, you've got one processor at one moment, then another processor, and then another processor, and it toggles. And we have this illusion that we're this expanded persona, when actually we are toggling between multi-personas. Now, you can disagree or agree, but I want to know if that makes sense. You don't have to swallow it, but does it make sense? Okay. Does that help your question a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not quite sure, but I think it kind of framed it.
Okay.
So, like I see it, ego is personality, and ego is the tool with which essence can create something in this world, because essence itself doesn't necessarily want to create something, but ego does and can.
Let's put it this way. If essence is everything and all potential, and it is the whole creation, it has nothing to create. It has no need to create, right? But it lives, it's like if you think quantum physics, you have the wave, which is everything, and then the particle, which is the wave collapsing, right, into one little crystallized thing. Our personality is that little crystallized particle. It comes from this wave of potential. And if the idea of creation is let's fully express that whole wave into that crystallized world, well, we have to keep going back and forth and pulling aspects of essence into the crystallized world. So that means we have to constantly go back to the wave, recrystallize, collapse back to the wave, recrystallize. But we can only do it one little pinpoint at a time. Another way to look at it as a metaphor is if you think of video games. In order to play a video game, you're going to play a character, okay? You're going to have your avatar. And it's like when you begin the video game, the avatar or the character is empty. It might have certain preferences, but it has 0 points right now, 0 experience points. And the whole thing, it has to go through the game and collect these experience points and rewards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We could look at our personality as the same thing. When we enter this world, it's an empty avatar, but what's controlling the avatar? It's you at the computer. So you at the computer are living in the world of essence. You have the full mind, full creativity. The avatar needs to gain the experience, okay? So in order, you can't enter the video game, but your avatar can. Essence cannot enter this world, but our personality can. And what happens is the personality forgets who's controlling the game. It thinks it is. So it's like the video game character believes, oh, well, I'm in control here, when it doesn't realize it's connected to a higher self, you at the computer, okay? Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I find that's a really good metaphor.
Okay, great. We're using this whole concept of EED for coaching, leadership, mediation, facilitation, healing. Really, it is reconciling ego with essence can help reconcile conflicts. It helps with enhancing coaching and leadership because it's bringing out the essential aspects of a person as opposed to the ego aspects. And it's balancing everything out. When it's related to healing, it's going directly back into source and restoring resilience, which already starts to restore health and the flow of energy. And there's more. Any questions around what EED does or what it's for? Or does it seem pretty clear so far? I don't know if I did a really good job on defining it. It's different every time. I thought the last webinar I did a really great job. Okay. So where is source located? What is source? Now, Paul mentioned at the beginning, game, source, dream. So we're working with 4 versions of truth, or 4 levels, okay? And I've got this pyramid here to show you. Think of it like an iceberg, like there's the tip of the iceberg, and then we can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And what this means is we're going into deeper levels of truth, or what truth can be. It becomes more and more expansive. These little diagrams on the side show our relationships and perceptions, so to speak. So when we're at the level of story, each person has their own point of view. They have their own personal belief system. They have their own personal experience of what the world is, all right? And everybody's story is unique unto themselves. Why? Because really it's like they're reflecting their perceptions and beliefs back onto themselves. They're seeing the world through their filters, which is as if we're in our own little bubble and we see the world on the surface of the bubble like a movie, as opposed to the true reality that's out here, okay? If I keep reinforcing my story, I'm going to reinforce how I'm experiencing the world. So it's a singular truth, and it's limited. It doesn't mean it's not true, all right? But it's very, very, very narrow. So if I believe that the world is highly competitive, there's scarcity, I have to fight for everything, I'm going to make sure that that's my reality if I keep reinforcing that story, all right? When we get into the level of game, this is when we have 2 stories coming together. 2 people who are in their own reality bubble will start bumping into each other. Now, their stories might agree or their stories might conflict. So this is where we find truth in opposition. I have my truth, you have your truth. And this can become the source of conflict, all right? When the 2 reality bubbles don't agree. And usually what we're trying to do is conquer each other, join my reality bubble, or I'm going to destroy yours, okay? So absorb or be absorbed, conquer or be conquered. That's what truth and opposition is. And they can be completely opposite to each other, but on game level, they don't fit together. If we start to open our bubble a little bit, okay, and the key there is to begin to accept the reality around us, to accept the opposition before us, and start to see things as complementary, where black and white are complementary to each other as opposed to oppositional or against each other. we start to expand our reality, and we start to expand our point of view. And this is the level that EED is working on. It is to start opening these bubbles so that we can start living in a more expanded truth, where truth can become fluid. Truth does not have to be black only. It does not have to be white only. It can be black and white, or neither. I'm not as rigid in what I believe is true. And it starts with a little bit of acceptance, and then to become fascinated, and then start to appreciate. We've talked in previous webinars, these 8 stages of truthful relationship, what opens the bubble. Once we start getting into this dream level, then it's easier to start dropping into source. Source is a level of unified truth. This is the level of all potential. Everything and nothing is true. It embraces paradox. This is where you're going to find unity in relationship, because the ego is actually disappearing. And we're just really essence to essence. I'll explain a little bit later what essence to essence looks like. The idea here is to create the ability to move from story to game to dream to source, and then back up from source to dream to game to story. And this is how transformation can take place. Story and game are very rigid. We're really working hard to protect the bubble, because if the bubble opens, we feel vulnerable, we may not exist anymore. We feel threatened. When we start moving into dream and source, it's less threatening, because we realize, oh, I don't have to be so rigid, because the more I'm connected to source, the more I realize I can be flexible, adaptable. I feel more infinite, more permanent, more timeless. I feel less attached to an identity. I can redefine my identity. I can even let go of my identity. And that enables me to be influenced and to influence. And this is where we have the transmutation takes place, because I can start rearranging myself and drawing from source, drawing aspects of source into my story. And I can reconstruct the story from there. How are you guys doing with this?
Question. What happens if one person accepts the other truth in the game stage, but the other one doesn't accept?
Right. Yeah, well, okay, so there's 2 things here. When one person starts dropping into dream, the other will automatically follow, because relationships are working like mirrors. However, one person may drop and then they might pop back up. And by the nature of the mirror, the other person may pop back up too. So they're going to follow each other. So really what we're doing is toggling back and forth, game, dream, game, dream. The more we drop into a dream, the longer we'll be able to stay and sustain. This is why I was saying earlier with Torsten, reconnect, reconnect, reconnect. Just keep reconnecting to this level of dream source. We'll be able to sustain it longer. So when we're using EED techniques, we're really dropping people into this dream place and then dropping them further into source. They're going to naturally pop back up into their game and their story. We don't have to follow them there. We can let them go there, and then we have ways to refocus them so they come back into dream and source. And actually quite quickly, they'll drop and stay longer. And then they'll start waking up in this dream and source place, and then they can have more conscious access to it. So then they can willfully direct themselves eventually into any of these levels, and they'll recognize each of the 4 levels. So especially when working with conflict, you're going to go back and forth very quickly between game, dream, game, dream. But like I said, the more we guide them into the dream place, the more they start letting go of game and story, the more they start waking up, and then the more they can willfully direct themselves, but we have to show them the way. Okay. So the transmutation really comes from really visiting consciously the level of dream and source. If we try to force a transformation at story and game, we might have the illusion that we're changing, but really it's going to snap back into place because these are rigid levels, story and game. Okay. So story and game is driven by emptiness, meaning a disconnection to source. And dream and source are basically the levels where we're going to connect with resilience, build resilience, and live by resilience. Right? They're rooted in resilience. So here we have source, and I also showed the same slide in the last webinar back in December. We may have an unconscious connection to source. Maybe the more we enter it, we'll have a more of a conscious connection. But source is always there, whether we know it or not. And when we experience life, two versions of ourselves will pop up. We have the resilient self and the pathetic self. Now, the main difference is the resilient self is connected to source. It's a direct expression of source. Whereas the pathetic self has a disconnection from source, and it feels like it needs to rely on itself. And it's trying to imitate source because it's trying to be its own source. Because of that disconnection, it has an underlying feeling of emptiness. It's that gap, all right? And so it's normally going to seek another source, something outside of itself to fill itself up so it can fill that gap, all right? I say pathetic self because it's based upon pathologies and strategies. It's also based on drama, and it's also based on self-indulgent. It's like, poor me, I'm so disconnected from source. I need to create, find source. I need to be the god of my world. I need to control everything. So it's very highly sensitive to disconnection, and it's trying to reconnect, okay? So it's great at identifying problems. It'll see all the cracks in the wall, but it doesn't know what to do about the cracks in the wall. It sees all the cracks as a problem. And underneath it all, it doesn't feel it possesses the creativity to fix the problem. And in fact, it's constantly driven by a need to fix. Whereas the resilient self will see the cracks in the wall and say, great, not threatened by it. A crack in the wall could be a beautiful thing, or it's a great opportunity to create something from. So what we really want to do is get the pathetic self and resilient self working together, okay? And what we want to do is first move our attention from pathetic self over to resilient self, okay? And plug resilient self back into source so that, I mean, it's really securely plugged in there. So it's not only an expression of source, but it sends energy back into source, okay? So there's a give and receive between source and resilient self. That maintains the connection. If we try to change, transform, or solve things from pathetic self, we're gonna just keep reinforcing that disconnection. So if the pathetic self is identifying a problem, great. Now move over to what's resilient in ourselves, plug into source, and then we can start taking action from there. That then creates a more healthy relationship between resilience and pathetic, so that they're working together, so that they're reinforcing each other. Pathetic provides the opportunity to create, and resilience does the creation and then feeds the pathetic self with creative energy so it can keep going. Because the pathetic self wants to collect experiences. They're both capable of taking action, all right? But like I said, pathetic self, when it takes action, it's all it's going to do is reinforce fear and need. It's driven by fear, need, and emptiness. Whereas resilient self is creating because it can, and it's creating from source. Pathetic self takes action in order to seek a source, in order to fill itself up. Whereas resilient self is taking action to simply create. How are you doing with this?
It's a very fine explanation.
What's making it fine, or what is this helping to clarify, or what does it illuminate for you?
Well, it seems very detailed for once,
Mm-hmm.
and like and it explains a lot in one picture. I don't know.
Okay. Anyone else?
Coming back to the ego that you introduced in the beginning, this explanation of ego. So I was mapping first the ego to the pathetic self, but also the resilient self can take action. This is also ego, because only ego can take action in the world.
That's right.
But it's a different state of ego.
That's right. That's a great way to define it. That they're both ego. They both can take the same action. But the only difference is this is the empty state of ego, trying to control everything, including its own existence and the world. And this is a connected, a state of ego that's reconciled with its essence, so that it understands that it is a vehicle of essence. Whereas pathetic self feels isolated. Okay, it doesn't feel connected to anything. They're both wishing to create. But when the resilient self is connected to source, it channels all that creativity. Pathetic self is imitating creativity because it is disconnected. But they're both ego. They're both states of ego. So really all we're doing is shifting the state of ego, shifting the state of personality. I don't know if I kept on track or went off track. Just let me know how you're doing with that, Torsten.
Yeah. I like the further details, and what I also, from this picture, at least for me, it is like I've got in peace with the pathetic self, because you said somehow they interact with each other, and the resilient self brings also something to the pathetic self.
Yeah.
So it's okay, because formerly I had always this thing in mind, I have to get out of the pathetic self always, and never. But this brings a bit of peace into the picture for me.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Use the, and we all have millions of pathetic selves, millions, the whole variety of colors. Okay. Whenever pathetic self pops up, you can call this a gremlin, negative voice, limited chatter, limited voice, whatever you want to call it, saboteur, anything. It's a doorway. Look at it as a doorway. And then in the next slides, I'll show you how do you make the transfer from pathetic to resilient, okay? And you're really just converting from red to green. That's it. And making sure that the green is plugged in, because if resilient self is not securely plugged back into source, it's going to shift back to a pathetic self, because it's going to disconnect again. All right. So the real point here is, why do we want to connect to source? Well, it's so that we're taking action from a resilient place, as opposed to taking action from fear. When we take action from fear, we're highly programmable. We can be influenced, and influenced in wrong directions. And what I mean by that is directions that are against our nature or against our autonomy. And this is what gets us into being controlled, being slaves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with the illusion of freedom or satisfaction. But really, everything we're doing is based on conditions and fear. When we are taking action from resilient self, we're not dependent on others. We're not dependent on conditions. We have true choice, and we have true liberation. We can create what we want willfully. not desperately. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
How do you help yourself or the others to understand that he's in the pathetic self versus resilient self? Asking the reasons for the action, or
yeah, okay, yeah, there is a simple test if we're coming from pathetic self or not. The pathetic self typically clings, okay? It
Could
typically,
you maybe repeat the question because the quality wasn't so good?
right. Christina was asking, how can you tell the difference between the pathetic self and the resilient self, right? How can you test out if it's the pathetic self speaking? Is that correct there, Christina? Okay. The pathetic self clings. It's clinging to something. Why? Because it seeks something outside of itself for security. It's trying to fill that emptiness, fill that gap. So if it says, I need this, okay, and it's clinging to it, do the opposite. Ask it, okay, well, what if you just let it go? Okay, do you really need it? And if they say, oh my God, yes, I can't do without it, they're not feeling resilient, all right? So you can tell, like, I need self-care, I need courage, I need to be nice, I need to be aggressive in order to, okay? When it sounds conditional, it's a pathetic self. I'm not saying it's bad to be nice. I'm not saying it's bad to be courageous or bad. None of that is bad. But if it's conditional, they're not coming from true strength. All right. So one of the first tests is, can they let it go and still feel okay? What is it to not do it? What is it to let it go? How are you still okay? That's a basic test. And that already can have them start to flip, all right? When they realize, oh, if I'm still okay without that thing, then I have an ability to survive beyond. Then they can go grab it back, but more from a resilient state, okay? That's the difference. I can be courageous and resilient. I can be nice and resilient. I can be cruel and resilient, all right? But the pathetic self is going to put rules and conditions on it, saying, well, you can't be nice because ... You can't be courageous because ... You can't be cruel because ... It's going to take anything and put rules and conditions around it, all right? It's taking away your freedom and autonomy. Does that help you a little bit, Christina? Okay. Another question you can ask if you want to get somebody into a sense of resilience, what is something nobody can ever take away from you? That takes them into a sense of what's permanent or timeless within them. What is something nobody could ever take away? And then have them connect to that. I can talk, in other webinars, I've talked more about this, and I can talk more as we go along, but I want to move through these slides a little bit more, okay? So, what is source? Well, it's all potential. It's an infinite awareness. It's beyond time. So it feels permanent and timeless. It is unconditional, okay? The essential qualities that go along, four main ones are peace, love, unity, limitlessness. Like Torsten saying, okay, now that I see that diagram, I feel more at peace with myself, with the pathetic selves. So that diagram just calms down a pathetic self that has to, battle the other pathetic selves or make them wrong or bad or say I have to eliminate them. No, actually, I can actually feel more integrated and at peace with myself, more unity with myself. There's more acceptance. Okay, there's less conditions. Okay, that brings me more into essence, all right? So a great tell when somebody is feeling resilient is they'll feel a little calmer. They'll feel a little bit more at peace. They may feel more connection to things. They may feel inspired and limitless and creative, all right? So those are our four main ones. When we have an essence-to-essence relationship to ourselves or to others, that's what's producing the resilience, the well-being, a feeling of unity and autonomy. We can still have differences, but because we're in a place of that's unconditional and permanent and timeless, there's no reason, there's no need to fight the differences. Because if we realize, oh, we're all potential, we're all expressions of the same thing, just as different colors, then nothing can really hurt me here. Because I am you, you are me, we are everything. You're today red and I'm blue, and then tomorrow you're blue and I'm red. So there really is no difference. So we can create with each other as opposed to creating against each other. Is that making sense, what I'm saying a little bit here? Is that helping? So this is one of the goals, is no matter whether we're coaching, leading, facilitating, or healing, we're getting people into the state of source, of essence, all right, where they're having a direct experience of these essential qualities that are self-generating, self-perpetuating, and unconditional, meaning they're not dependent on anything outside of themselves, all right? I just radiate love. I radiate peace. I am peace. I am unity, okay? Any comments or questions? Let's see, I'm just going to read here. Amiel, you wrote something. Okay, so the pathetic self always clings. Oh, you say, do I really need this 100%? Right, you're just testing out, do you really need that? Do you absolutely need that? Because pathetic selves function in absolutes as well, okay? When they realize, yeah, I really want this, I really need it, but 100%? No, as soon as they find that little 1% that says, actually, I don't need this 100%, I can move beyond it or live beyond it, that's opening a pathway to resilience, okay? All right, so here's a way. So this is how we work, very basically with EED is, we don't work with a person's words, story, or language, okay? Because that can help just reinforce the game, reinforce the story, it'll reinforce the pathetic self. A pathetic self is run by story, rules, and conditions. What we want to look for is how are they behaving and acting, and really focus on the energy that they're coming from. We want to make them aware of the energy they're connected with and have them experience it. We want to act upon them and get their response, and have them act upon themselves and get the response. How do I act back and forth between myself and the other person? How am I acting upon myself? And a direct path to resilience is no matter what's going on, no matter what the energy is, whether it's resistance or something else, there's a strength being used. Anytime we're using energy, it is a strength. It might be channeled through the pathetic self to run away from fear, but it takes strength to run away from fear. It takes strength to try to create. It takes strength to fight. So we want to capture the strength of the moment and then link that to the person's well-being. And then you can ask, okay, so that strength, how does it feed you? That energy, what are you enjoying now in it? When you're connected to that strength, what is reinforced in you? And then that's going to act upon them again. They're going to react, and we just keep going around and around and around like a fractal, action and response. But what we're responding to is the energy, and linking that energy as a strength towards their well-being. And then they'll get more and more connected to their well-being. And that starts closing that gap and starts connecting them more and more to source. Any questions?
Yeah, are these the questions you mentioned in the beginning? And then if they don't immediately work. Does it work if you just repeat them over and over? How does this
Yeah,
feel?
it can. And it always does work. Actually, let me demo it. I can do a 2-3 minute demo. Would somebody like to work with me? Or Amiel, if you want to work with me.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and you can, I want you to be natural. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to try and give me a hard time here, okay? I mean, if you want, I can get around it. It just takes a little longer, that's all. But, okay, so I'm working with your behavior right now. I'm not even gonna ask for a topic on the table, okay? Like, I mean, I could say, hey, what's something you're struggling with? We can do that.
Yeah.
But even just so the way I see you sitting now, it's like this. Okay, you've got your face cupped by your hands or your fists. You're smiling, and what's the first thing you're experiencing when you sit like this on that bouncy ball?
Fluidity.
Fluidity.
Like movement.
Movement. Okay. So what are you enjoying in fluidity and movement?
That I can change anytime.
Okay, what's it like to know that you can change at any time? That's an awareness question, okay? I'm being transparent as I do this. What's it like to know you can change at any time?
It opens up possibilities.
Okay, it opens up possibilities. Now, when she says opens up possibilities, that behind that is an essential quality of limitlessness, all right? We're not quite there at essence yet, but all right, so that ability to open, okay, and that ability to move, how's that a strength for you?
Well, like now I don't get any answer.
Okay, okay, and are you still here? And you laugh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still here.
You're still here. Okay, and what's that like to just be able to know you're still here? Know you can laugh? Know you can smile?
Well, it's good.
And what's good about it for you?
I don't know that I can do it.
Okay, and there, how does that feed your own well-being when you say, yeah, even if I don't know I can do it. I can.
Yeah, like I don't need to do anything specific, but just laughing or being here is already enough.
Okay, what does that reinforce in you? Being here is already enough.
Well, it's relaxing.
What do you enjoy in that relaxation?
I don't know.
Yeah, and you are laughing. And so what's it like to just, what are you experiencing now? Just as you laugh, you rock back and forth, like you're there.
Well, like I was trying to search for something and then I thought, oh, I don't need to know. Like it's okay.
And what does that give you?
More relaxation.
Okay, so I'll stop it there. Do you see how we go in and out, in and out, in and out, right? So I am not bothered if she disconnects. I'm not bothered if she jumps and says, I need to analyze. I just keep putting her into what's the direct experience now of what's happening now. I'm constantly working with her behavior, her action, and her energy. And everything that's happening, there's a strength in it. There's also a pathetic self in it, okay? But I'm choosing not to focus there. I want to capture the strength and keep linking strength to well-being. And the more I do it, the more she'll start to flow, the more she'll open up, the more the answers flow. And then at some point, maybe it shuts down. That's fine. I just reopen with what's the action of the moment now? What's the behavior of the moment now? Now, this is a very small fractal, okay? This is a very basic way of working. All right, now I can add more to it and it can get more and more complex and we can move further. I mean, this is not a full leadership technique. This is not a full coaching technique. It's not a full a facilitation technique or a reconciliation technique, but it is the core fractal of any EED technique we use, okay? Action, response, awareness, experience, all related to strength and well-being. And I can go back and back, go around and around and around in a circle with this. How does this feed you? What are you enjoying? What's now reinforced? Now what's here? How's that a strength? Link that to the well-being. And that is what keeps redirecting her down into this dream and source level. Now there's more techniques that we can do that then create something of that. But this is the basic way to get somebody to drop. What were your observations on, just on that small interaction or that small demo? Are there questions, comments, or observations? Anything?
Yeah, I liked that when I didn't know an answer, you just took my reaction, took my saying that I don't have an answer as the next thing to work on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I liked the fact that it wasn't feeling aggressive at any moment. It was just a game, a soft one, a kind one. Amiel wasn't feeling the need to close and to hide.
Right.
It was playful.
Okay, so it was playful, it was not aggressive. I want to emphasize something that because I am not looking for transformation, okay, and because I am coming from a place of acceptance, whatever happens over there with her, I work with it. I don't need to transform her experience. So that's what allows it to be playful. That's what's going to invite her to open more and more. If she wants to play games with me and close up and open and close and make me chase her, fine, I can do that too. If I keep coming from a base of acceptance without the need to transform, then I am not engaging or aggravating her pathetic self. And I'm going to move her faster into a dream level. And because I'm not coming from my own pathetic self. Do you understand? So this is why, as like a first rule, I really just want to capture the strength and well-being of the person, no matter how they behave. And I want to refocus that into restoring their sense of resilience before we make any changes or transformations. That will then become, once we start dropping more into source level, things will naturally start transmuting, okay? And she's already transforming herself. The more she relaxes into herself, the more she has a more self-acceptance, the more she can accept to say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I actually feel okay. And I'm enjoying just the simple thing that's going on right now. That's a building block, okay? So that's what makes EED, in a way, non-confrontational, but I certainly could confront her if I want. I can have her confront herself, but even if I do that, I'm still coming from an acceptance of what's going on, all right? If I confront someone from non-acceptance, that's where it gets aggressive, that's where it gets manipulative. Non-acceptance creates manipulation, all right? Is that clear for everyone? Okay. So where do we go further here? Well, if we keep doing that more and more and more, we can start building an active energy where she's saying, oh, okay, so now I feel like there's possibilities. I can feel a bit limitless. I can feel creative. I can build that and get her very excited. And then I could say, let's go take action from there. But before I do that, I want to plug in that active energy into source being. And this is an example of a formula on how you can do that. Get them to simply be the energy. What is it like to just be fluid and flexible? What's it like to just be relaxed. The key question here is what feels permanent and timeless there, okay? That gets them into the feeling of this is unconditional. You want them to receive the benefits of that state of being. What does that give your well-being? And then what feels unconditional in you now? And that might get a deeper level of an energy. Okay, and we can do this over and over. What's it like to be this energy? What feels permanent and timeless? What does that give you? And now what feels unconditional? And it'll keep purifying the energy until it becomes an essential quality, where it'll end up somewhere being limitlessness, peace, love, or unity. Then we can capture that in a localized place in the body, like a body center. They'll feel a sensation, and we match the essential quality with that sensation in body center. Would you like to see that demoed? Yes, no, or maybe? Yeah? Okay.
I would be fine with the demo, actually.
You'd be fine to see the demo?
I like these things, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Like, I can be the client or Amy. I don't mind.
Okay. I was wondering whether just to continue with Amiel, since I already got it started.
Okay, we can do.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, Paul, because we already got something started. Okay, well, okay, so, okay, what's very active in you right now, Amiel? You just said, okay, we can do it. You climb back up on that ball. You actually, your energy seems even more. Your face has turned a little more red. Your smile's a little bigger. What's going on?
Yeah, well, I kind of thought, oh no, I'm not doing the demo, but then I was like, okay, now I have to do it. So I thought, okay, get back in the energy.
Okay, so get back in. Now, what does that feel like right now? I'm getting back in. You jumped on the ball.
Yeah, it's good. Like, I can do it. I can be here.
I can be here. Okay, so I can be. What is it like to just simply be that? I can be. I can be here. What are you connected to there?
It's relaxing.
Yeah, okay. So the energy is now shifting. It's getting more relaxing. So what is it like to be relaxed like that? Even as you say, yeah.
Yeah, I thought I want to sleep.
Yeah, okay. Don't go to sleep yet. Stay active with it. You can be relaxed, but stay awake. Just there, when you close your eyes, you smile, what feels permanent? What feels timeless right there?
I don't know, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, any words or images or
Like
just
a calm sea.
a calm sea. Okay, so allow that to be. What's it like to be a calm sea? Notice what that gives back to you, what it gives your well-being.
Well, it's even more relaxing. I don't even want to answer anymore.
That's great. So it's even more relaxing. And what feels unconditional in that?
I don't know.
Well, in fact, where do you feel the calm sea the most, or the relaxation the most? Where physically is it?
It's like here. Like, yeah.
And so go there, in this area here. What's the general sensation of it? The physical sensation.
I don't know. I feel like I'm in the sea, like the sea is here.
Okay, great. So you are in the sea. So does it feel warm, cold, watery, or something else?
It's more like a wave that's smoothly just
Okay,
wavering a bit.
great. And what's it like to be that wave? Your whole being is that wave.
Relaxing.
Yeah, it is. It's wonderful. How does that feed your own well-being, your sense of self?
Well, it's really nice to find that here because I think this image that I have right now, maybe I can recall this.
Yeah, okay, so great. So let's anchor it. How is it happening now? What are the key characteristics? The small little details.
Like when I hear my breath, it's kind of like the beckoning of the waves.
Okay. And what do you enjoy in that with every breath? Right there, as you breathe out, you're smiling. What
Yeah,
do you enjoy?
that it's just there, that I like have this sound and it comes out of me, but it sounds like the waves.
Okay, it sounds like the waves. And what does that give back to you when you are the sound of the waves? Every breath is the sound of the waves.
A new perspective on my breath.
Okay.
Oh.
So what is the quality now, or what's that new discovery in the breath?
Clarity?
Great. So stay with the clarity. So there's the wave, the sound of the wave, the breath, the relaxation, and clarity. How is it to simply be that? How is it to live with that?
Still relaxing, but I got a little bit tension coming up.
Okay, great. And how is it to have the tension in your body when the wave is there?
It's a bit stiff, like holding.
Okay. All right. What are you holding on to? The tension or holding on to the wave?
Holding on to the tension.
Okay. Now, switch back into the wave, just the sound of the breath, the enjoyment that the breath gave you, and then look back towards the tension. And what's it like to have tension or be with tension when you are the wave? What's the first reaction?
Well, it surrounds the tension.
The wave surrounds the tension. Okay.
Yeah. Like it's more okay then.
So what's it like to know that? Okay. The wave surrounds the tension and it's more okay. It's okay. What does that give you?
It's reassuring.
So what feels reassured in you right now, even if it's a little bit?
I don't know.
What makes you laugh?
That it's okay to not know.
Okay, there, that it's okay to not know. What part of your body reacts to that? It's okay to not know.
My heart, like I light up a little.
Okay, great. So stay with the lighting up in the heart. And you can breathe into that place or simply just move your awareness into that place. And what is the experience there or the kind of energy there?
It's joy, creativity.
Joy and creativity. Great. What does that give your well-being, your sense of self? How does it feed you?
It relaxes me, but on a different plane.
Yeah. See, we're at new levels of layers here. So you not only have the wave and the relaxation, but now you've got joy in the heart. You've got, as well as you've got clarity, you've got light, right? When you just focus on the heart, what's the main sensation in there? First thing that comes.
I don't know, it's beating.
Beating. Okay, great. And as it beats, what feels permanent there? Or what feels timeless or forever?
I guess it will always beat.
Yeah. And what's your reaction to that? It will always beat.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So how is it to feel joy? Is it still there or no? Or is it gone?
No, it's still there. And
Yes.
now, as you asked, I got into the relaxation from before again.
Okay. So what's the main quality of your experience now? Beating heart, joy, relaxation. What feels unconditional, like what never will go away?
I'm not sure. I was thinking the wave, but
There
I'm
you
not
go.
sure.
Just go with that. Just the wave. So there's always a wave. What does that reinforce in you?
I'm not sure.
Okay, then don't. Take the wave away. It's fake.
Oh my God.
What's that reaction right there? What'd that
I
just
don't
do?
know. I'm surprised that it's fake because it felt so good.
Oh, so you decide. Fake
Well,
or real?
I think it was real.
Why? How?
It felt pretty real. Like there was
What,
no tension.
no tension. So, and what else was the real feeling there? What made it so real for you?
The image.
The image. What was the image?
Well, really just a big plane of water.
Okay. And when you see that image, the big plane of water, what does that give back to you?
Makes me drop my shoulders and
Okay. And as you drop your shoulders, what are you enjoying?
that I can let go. At least partly.
I think you can let go. Okay. Yeah. So just go with the partly. Just go with, okay, I can let go. And then what feels reassuring there? What is reinforced in you?
I'm getting a bit impatient. Like,
Good.
I want this to end.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. So what wraps it up for you?
But I don't know.
What brings you back to the wave, and what's the usefulness of the wave?
I can think of my breath and think of the image, and it brings me relaxation, and
Okay.
I feel like just laying down.
Okay. Yeah. And will you do that forever?
No, maybe when I go to bed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's one source. All right. This is a source where you can drop your tension. And then the impatience would be another door we could explore, because that's also active energy. All right. And that can be another kind of energy to create, move forward. So, great. Now, there was one thing I did there to provoke her. Did you guys notice what that was?
The moment when you took the wave, it was a moment when where you testing if she's in the pathetic self or in the authentic self.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, oh, that wave, it's fake. It's not real, because she was starting to disengage a little bit, or wanted to get it anchored. So by me taking it away, she had to grab it back and reconstruct it for herself. And she chose to make it more real for herself. Do you see? Otherwise, I would have been doing all the work. All right. So that's one way. And the other one, when she starts to get impatient, that to me, that means, okay, so we're ready to move on to something else. It's like we've beaten the dead horse. We can come back to that way, but we need to explore yet another aspect, okay? Yet another quality, or it needs to be applied, okay? But we don't have time for that. So you start to listen to these cycles of when is enough enough? When does the new energy start? I mean, we learn this. I'm not going to cover that necessarily in this webinar, but in future webinars and in past webinars, we've covered that. But you can use these questions in any order, all right? And they will reinforce and interrelate back onto each other, and they'll reinforce the experience. The main thing is just to, whatever energy they're experiencing, it feeds their well-being. There's a sense of permanence in it, and you want to capture that in a body center with a sensation so that it's tangible and they can recapture it. In future webinars, I can show you how to take source being and move it back into active energy. But for now, you can take any energy and move it into source being using these questions. What are you guys taking away from this so far?
It was a visual experience. So we could see very well how she dropped into dream, how she became calm, and how she could reconnect to being calm. I'm thinking a bit about the question, what makes it difficult to stay connected to source? Like after some time of calmness, she became a bit more active again and needed to move on, or just switch back to a pathetic self.
There's an ebb and a flow. We'll only stay in source so long, right? Then our ego will start to wake up again and say, look, I'm getting bored. I need to do something with this. Now you can choose to follow that or not. Okay, now if they're resisting source, you want to just keep bringing them back until they relax into it and settle into it. But you also don't want them to start clinging to it, to say, oh, I just want to be relaxed here forever. No, you got to shake that up. There needs to be a balance of moving from source back into the game or moving from game back into source. This is what's going to create a balancing effect. Source energy is fine to stay there forever, okay? But then there's a part of us that wants to wake up and use that energy. So what we also teach here is how to activate that source energy so it starts to be creative and start to create so that it can give something out to the world, receive something back, recharge, give back out, receive. So everything is based on the give-receive of energy.
What I also liked about the demonstration was that the pathetic self and the resilient self were very visually present in form of a symbol. Like the resilient self was a wave, and then there was a stress that was also pictured with some tension or something. And then she said, yeah, the wave wraps around the tension and it eases it. So I liked that actually most about the presentation or demonstration, that we could see the theory of the slide beforehand, like how they're working together, like what does it look like? And it feels to me like dream pictures, like it's probably is it by accident that the dream is called the dream, because of
The reason
the
I'm
dreamy
calling it
pictures and
dream
symbols.
is it's because it's a more fluid reality. Okay, when you're in a dream state, right, everything is less rigid. All right, when you're dreaming,
Yeah.
right, I can pick up a coffee cup and then I can look away and now it's a ball. It could, you know, your dreams are shifting and changing, whereas our concrete reality, it's concrete and rigid. That's what I mean.
And to the dream reality, it was where you brought her. You shifted her into the dream reality. Then she had a symbol for the stress. She had a symbol for the relief.
And get
then
them
we
to
could
work
just,
together. Yeah.
we saw it play out.
Now, what I want to stress here is this is a small fractal that could be applied to larger levels, but to get her to be conscious and drop into what's the wave, how does that relate to the tension, and just to exercise that in a microcosm could be applied to bigger situations, right? When we can isolate things into the small fractal and just train that little bit, all right? And that would be the homework, little micro actions. Just get back to the breath, get back to the wave. We don't have to accomplish big things, big actions, not yet, all right? Then she could become more practiced and more willful in bringing back the wave at any time and not be threatened by tension, not be threatened by, I don't have an answer, not be, you know, to keep relaxing into, oh yeah, no matter what's going on, I know, don't have to have an answer yet. I'm still here, I'm flowing, I'm adaptable. That was her basic fractal of the whole session, okay? She can take the pressure off herself. Does that make sense to you, Amiel, what I just said? Thumbs up on that? Okay, great. So yeah, we're moving constantly between the client or the person is going to move from pathetic self to resilient self. We're orienting them towards resilient self, plugging that into source. When they start dropping into source, it's like this vertical loop of circulating source energy and then giving out source energy and taking that back into source. And then the pathetic self might come back in to identify a new doorway to explore. And we just keep cycling back and forth between these levels of game, dream, source, back to dream, back to game, back to dream, back to source. What's usually happening is people are just staying in this game and they're playing games with themselves and giving them the illusion that they're relaxed or that they're creative, and it's not really there. Whereas when we drop them in truly into a dream and source level, we can welcome back the game and it just opens new levels of the game. Questions, comments? So let me summarize here.
One thing.
Yeah.
When you say, what was it? Could you put the slide before again, because it helps my memory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I still don't have it, but I think it was when they present like relaxation and it's fake. Does that mean they just look relaxed, but they don't really feel relaxed?
It could be anything. So what I'm looking for is a full congruency or integration of the word with the energy, with the thought, with the action, the emotion, all of it lines up. If it's just an idea of relaxation, but they're not connecting to their body or they're not able to make those connections. So maybe it's an idea of I should be relaxed, or I think I'm relaxed, or I'm trying to be relaxed. I can test that out and take it away, right? In other webinars and in future webinars, we'll show you more of those testing, how to test things out. To be simple, just look at the main energy now. That's it. And even if it's, I'm in a space of nothingness, well, there's a strength in that too. And that feeds the well-being. This is where, the real point I want to make in this webinar is that whatever is happening, assume or take on the point of view that there's a strength. What's the pure energy behind what's happening, and link that to well-being. Whether they're fighting, resisting, relaxing, breathing, any of it, they can relate to as a strength. And when you add in the questions of what Are you enjoying? How does this feed your well-being? How does this nurture you? What feels permanent and timeless? That drops it more and more into a resilient state and eventually into source, okay? And then that can be usable. So everywhere, in any kind of conversation or any kind of work you're doing, listen and respond to the actions, behavior, and energy of a person rather than their words or feelings, meaning emotions, or the narrative, okay? So for Amiel, I'm not engaging with, I don't know what this is. I don't have words to describe. That's more words and narrative. So I'm more looking at what's the sound of her voice? What's the rhythm? What's her behavior? I mean, she's just rocking back and forth and smiling in a semi-blissful state. That's what I'm engaged with, okay? If I start engaging with words and emotions and narrative, I could be taking her away from source and back into game and story, all right? No matter what's going on, focus on the strength of the moment and link it to the person's well-being. Even if they're angry, there's a pure energy in that anger. There's a strength in that. Link that back to well-being. So if there's resistance, remember, resistance is resilience. Focus on the energy itself, not on what they're resisting. Does that make sense what I'm saying here around focus on the energy of the resistance, not on what they're resisting? Any comments or questions on that?
It seems easy when you are saying, but in a real interaction, it's harder not to connect to the world and the story.
Yeah. In normal conversations or whatever, yeah, we're going to want to connect to words and ideas and the narrative, or if they resist, like, stop harassing me, or like when Amiel said, I'm just impatient, I want this to stop. Like, okay, that's a resistance, right? For example. So I don't need to get into, but why are you impatient? Or why do you want to stop now? It was going so good. What are you resisting now? So that energy of stop, or that energy of no, just feel the energy when you say no or stop. What do you enjoy in that energy? It's not about the concept. What are you fighting against, or what are you trying to stop? It's just the pure act and energy of saying no or stop. That's what's going to get them into the pure energy of the resilience. The resistance is more of the story. The resilience is the energy. Does that help clarify it a little bit more?
Yes, but I just said it gets hard. How can I do it more open?
Yeah, well, this is why we have our trainings, right? So I mean, the webinars give you the introduction to it, okay? And other webinars cover this a little bit more. No matter what energy is happening, when you get a person into enjoyment of their energy, that gives them a clear path to their well-being. What you want to work is a free flow of give and receive, giving and receiving, of giving out the energy and receiving it back, giving out the energy and receiving it back. That's what's going to reinforce dropping into source. Remember that essential qualities feel permanent and timeless, and they reinforce well-being, all right? They're unconditional and self-generating, and they are self-perpetuating. So for example, trust is not an essential quality because it depends on something or somebody else. Peace, that's pretty timeless. It self-generates. We can radiate peace. We can radiate love. We don't need anything to feel peace or love or unity or connection, okay? The pathetic self is just simply disconnected from source. Now, I didn't do this in the demo, but when you have a pathetic self, you can ask it, what is it trying to accomplish? What's it seeking? And use that energy that it's busy trying to seek. I need to seek safety. Okay, use that energy to begin to cultivate that own quality of safety within yourself. You don't need to seek safety. You are safety, for example, or you are security. Use the resistance of the pathetic self. Again, just focus on the energy of it and loop it back with reinforcement, well-being, enjoyment, give and receive, and it calms the pathetic self down, okay? If there's fear, need, or desperation, reinforce a person's basic vitality first. Like the question, what's something nobody can take away from you? Or like with Amiel, I said, well, you know, that wave, it's probably fake. Well, no, there is something real. I'm getting down to a basic vitality, a basic core truth in her. So what is real about this for you? You don't need to depend on my approval or somebody else's, right? What's your core basic vitality? Questions? So this is just basically an introduction into connecting into source. I'm giving you a few techniques that you can walk away with. You'll get the recording. You can watch this again. The modules are coming up in Frankfurt, Paris, Munich, and Berlin. And we have, this is in module 1, Revealing Essence. This is where we train you very specifically for 3 days, how to move from story to game to dream to source, how to use these techniques regularly. We practice. How do you move a person from narrative into more of their own well-being, how to engage with that source energy, how to reactivate source energy back into a resilient self, how to recognize pathetic self. You're not going to get it from a 1-hour webinar. I mean, right? So it takes practice and supervision. And this is what we train specifically in module 1, is moving through those levels, working much more specifically with source and essential qualities, and then applying that back into action. So we have modules in Europe coming up in Frankfurt, March 13th, in Paris, March 20th, in Munich, March 27th, and in April 24th, and in Berlin in June 12th. Our next webinar is going to deal with emotions, okay, and how emotions we can program ourselves through emotion, or we can deprogram through emotion. And so it's going to be a 2-parter. We have January 29th, false narratives and emotional tyranny. This is how to recognize when emotions are working against us, okay, and creating a false programming of false belief systems, or making us non-resilient, and we're losing our autonomy. And then the webinar afterwards on February 12th is how do we rebuild our narratives? How do we reconstruct a resilient self? And what's the role that emotions play when we want to program a new narrative in ourselves that comes from resilience and autonomy? So feel free to join us on January 29th to look at the pros and cons of working with emotions, how they can be used effectively or not. And then later in the year, we'll have courses with dealing with conflict, reconciling conflict with the EED in June in Munich, and also working with team dynamics in November in Frankfurt. What are you taking away from today? I know there's a lot of information. What stands out?
For me,
Can you speak a little louder, Christina? Your microphone is muffled.
yes, my mic is not good. But
Okay.
I wanted to tell you that part of this info I heard before in your webinar.
Yeah.
But every time when I'm listening to you, it's a different layer. It's a different stage of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I was, it's the first time I was like, oh my God, what's happening here? Now it seems that it's so logical what you are saying. And
Yeah.
I have one question that I have.
Okay.
It keeps coming back to me. When we are coming back from the dream and from the game, and we are coming back to our own story,
Yeah.
we're coming back transformed if we are going to the source and if we are staying, if we are practicing enough, being in the story, in the dream, in connecting with the source, then the transmutation is happening, not the transformation, but it's the natural transformation is happening.
There's a natural transformation because we have more fluidity, more autonomy. All right. The story is no longer rigid and conditional. We're no longer clinging to that one story.
Yeah.
We will always have a story, but if we cling to it, that's where we lose our resilience. If I can take this story, this belief in myself, and then I can let that go, take on another belief in myself, I haven't lost my sense of self. Okay, but I'm no longer using stories and beliefs and things around me to define me. I'm able to define myself from within according to my direct experience of source. So when we're drawing this connection from story all the way down to source, back to story, the story now becomes more rich and fluid, flexible, and adaptable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so that means we can deconstruct and reconstruct ourselves at any moment at will, all right? And it's us who's creating ourselves, not something outside of us, right? Any other comments or final things to say of what you take away? If you want more information on emergent essence dynamics, you can visit our website at www.essence-dynamics.com. Visit us on Facebook or Twitter at EE Dynamics. You can email us info@essence-dynamics.com or email me directly, Troy, Troy, at essence-dynamics.com. I'm going to give you all a follow-up email, which will have a recording of this webinar. If you wish to access previous webinars, just send me an email and I'll send you a link to our playlist on YouTube. Right now we have it as a private playlist. Later in the year, we'll release edited down versions of these webinars. And come join our courses this year. Right now, throughout January, you can save $100 off courses. And because you participated in the webinar, I'm giving you an even better deal, which you'll receive by email in the next day or two, okay, if you're interested to join us. So thank you for joining us today. Great to see you. We have another webinar on January 29th. And in the meantime, go experiment with the things you learned.